Just as I was about to give up and crawl back onto the couch, the door to the suite swung open and Jason walked in. He looked tired, his tie loosened and his jacket slung over one shoulder. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual cold, distant expression. "You're still here," he said, almost surprised. "Where else would I go?" I replied, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. He didn't answer. Instead, he tossed his jacket onto a chair and walked over to the window, staring out at the city below. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable, until I couldn't take it anymore. "What do you want from me, Jason?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. "I don't want anything from you, Eve. This marriage is just a means to an end. Once the 2 months are over, we'll go our separate ways. You'll get what you want, and I'll get what I need." "And what exactly is that?" I pressed, not willing to let him off the hook so easily. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Let's just say that I need to have total ownership of the family business, and I cannot do that unless I'm married to a woman from a reputable family, Eve. The shareholders are breathing down my neck, demanding that I secure the future of the company. They don't care how I do it, as long as I get married. That's all this marriage is to me, a way to keep them off my back." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. So that's what this was all about, a business arrangement, a transaction to secure his future. I was nothing more than a means to an end, a tool to be used and discarded when I was no longer needed. I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill over. "And what about me, Jason? What do I get out of this?" "You get financial security," he replied bluntly. "Your parents will be taken care of, and you'll have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Isn't that what you wanted?" I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that money wasn't everything, that I wanted more out of life than just financial security. But I knew it would be pointless. Jason wasn't the type to understand or care about things like love, happiness, or fulfillment. Instead, I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. "Fine, I'll play along with your plan, but don't expect me to be happy about it." "I don't expect you to be happy, Eve," he said, his voice cold and detached. "I just expect you to do your part." With that, he turned and walked into the bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the living room, my heart heavy with anger and sadness. I had known this marriage would be difficult, but I hadn't expected it to be this soul-crushing. As I stood there, staring at the closed door of the bedroom, I made a silent vow to myself. I would survive this, somehow. I would find a way to make it through the next 2 months without losing myself completely. And when it was all over, I would walk away from this marriage with my head held high, knowing that I had done what was necessary to protect my family. But I wouldn't let Jason, or anyone else break me. Not now, not ever. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Jason getting ready for another day at the office. He was already dressed in a sharp suit, his hair perfectly styled, and his expression as unreadable as ever. He barely acknowledged my presence as I got out of bed and headed to the bathroom. As I brushed my teeth, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My eyes were tired, my hair a mess, and there was a sadness in my expression that I hadn't seen before. I splashed some cold water on my face, trying to wash away the exhaustion and the emotions that were threatening to overwhelm me. When I emerged from the bathroom, Jason was already gathering his things. "I have meetings all day," he said without looking at me. "You can do whatever you want. Just stay out of trouble." I nodded silently, not trusting myself to speak. I didn't want to argue with him, didn't want to give him any more reasons to look down on me. As he left the suite, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. At least now I had some time to myself, some time to think about what I was going to do. I couldn't just sit around and wait for the next 2 months to pass. I needed a plan, a way to regain some control over my life. I spent the morning exploring the hotel, trying to distract myself from the reality of my situation. The hotel was luxurious, with all the amenities one could ask for: spas, pools, restaurants, and more. But none of it interested me. I felt like a ghost, wandering through the halls without purpose, without direction. It wasn't until I found myself in the hotel's library that I finally felt a sense of peace. The room was quiet and cozy, with shelves full of books and comfortable chairs where I could sit and lose myself in a story. I picked out a book at random and settled into a chair by the window, hoping that the words on the page would provide some escape from my thoughts. As I read, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease, the knot in my stomach loosening just a bit. For a few hours, I was able to forget about Jason, about the marriage, about everything that had been weighing me down. But as the sun began to set, reality came crashing back. I couldn't stay in the library forever. I had to go back to the suite, had to face whatever awaited me there. When I returned to the room, Jason was already there, sitting at the dining table with his laptop open. He didn't look up as I entered, didn't acknowledge me at all. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to break the silence. "Did your meetings go well?" He glanced at me briefly, then returned his attention to his screen. "They went fine." I bit my lip, unsure of what else to say. The awkwardness between us was palpable, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap. After a few moments of silence, Jason spoke again. "I've arranged for us to attend a charity gala tomorrow night. It's important for appearances." "Okay," I said quietly, not knowing what else to say. "You'll need a dress," he continued, still not looking at me. "I'll have someone take you shopping tomorrow." I nodded, feeling a pang of resentment at how he was treating me like a doll to be dressed up and paraded around. But I kept my thoughts to myself, knowing that arguing with him would get me nowhere. That night, As I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that had settled over me. This wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, and I had no idea how I was going to get through the next 2 months without losing myself completely. But one thing was clear: I couldn't rely on Jason for anything. If I was going to survive this, I would have to do it on my own. And so, as the city lights twinkled outside the window, I made a promise to myself. I would find a way to make it through this marriage, to come out on the other side stronger and more independent than ever before. And I wouldn't let Jason, or anyone else, define my worth. The next morning, I was awakened by a soft knock on the door. Groggily, I sat up in bed, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Come in," I called, my voice hoarse from sleep. A hotel staff member entered, her demeanor polite and professional. "Good morning, Mrs. Coleman. Mr. Coleman has arranged for you to visit a boutique today to pick out a dress for the charity gala this evening. A car will be waiting for you in an hour." I nodded, trying to suppress the irritation bubbling up inside me. Jason was orchestrating my day like I was one of his employees. "Thank you," I replied, forcing a smile. As the staff member left, I got out of bed and headed to the bathroom. The events of the previous day had left me emotionally drained, and I wasn't looking forward to spending the day shopping for a dress I didn't even want. But I knew I had no choice. This was just another part of the role I had to play. After a quick shower, I dressed in the clothes I had brought with me, a simple blouse and jeans, nothing fancy. I didn't feel like putting in any more effort than necessary. I tied my hair back in a loose ponytail and applied minimal makeup. There was no point in trying to impress anyone. This was just another task to get through. An hour later, I was in the back of a sleek black car, being driven to one of the most exclusive boutiques in the city. The streets of New York were bustling with activity, but I felt detached from it all, like I was watching the world from behind a glass wall. When we arrived at the boutique, I was greeted by a team of stylists who were clearly expecting me. They ushered me inside, their smiles polished and practiced, but I could sense the curiosity in their eyes. I was sure they were wondering who I was, why I was here, and why I didn't seem more excited about the prospect of shopping for a high-end dress. I tried to muster some enthusiasm as they showed me racks of designer gowns, but it was difficult. The dresses were beautiful, no doubt, but they felt like costumes, something I was expected to wear to fit into Jason's world, not something that reflected who I really was. After trying on several options, I finally settled on a floor-length, emerald green gown that accentuated my figure without being too revealing. The fabric was soft and luxurious, and the color complemented my complexion. As I stood in front of the mirror, I had to admit that I looked good, elegant, even. But there was still a part of me that felt like an imposter, like I didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege. The stylists seemed pleased with my choice, and they quickly said about accessorizing the dress with jewelry and shoes. By the time they were finished, I looked every bit the part of a high society wife, but I felt like a stranger in my own skin. As I left the boutique, my new dress carefully packaged and carried by one of the staff members, I couldn't help but wonder what the gala would be like. I had never attended such an event before, and the thought of mingling with New York's elite made me nervous. But I knew I had to keep up appearances for Jason's sake, if not for my own. The car ride back to the hotel was quiet, giving me time to reflect on everything that had happened since the wedding. It was hard to believe that it had only been a few days. It felt like a lifetime had passed. The realization that I had to keep up this facade for another 2 months was overwhelming, but I knew I had no choice. My family's future depended on it. Back at the hotel, I carefully laid out the dress and accessories on the bed. The gala was still hours away, but I felt a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. I had never been good at pretending, and the thought of having to smile and make small talk with people I didn't know or care about was daunting. As the afternoon wore on, I tried to distract myself with a book, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to the gala, to what Jason had said about not caring about my happiness and how I was just a means to an end, and to the harsh reality of our marriage. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep living like this, trapped in a loveless, transactional relationship with no say in my own life. But what could I do? I was tied to Jason by a contract, by my family's financial needs, and by my own sense of duty. Walking away wasn't an option, not at all. As evening approached, I reluctantly began to get ready for the gala. I slipped into the emerald gown, feeling its weight settle around me like a shroud. The jewelry was heavier than I expected, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all a bit too much, like I was being adorned for display rather than dressed for an evening out. When I emerged from the bedroom, Jason was waiting for me in the living room, already dressed in a sharp black tuxedo. He looked up as I entered, his eyes briefly scanning my appearance before returning to his phone. "You look fine," he said, his tone dismissive. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "Thanks," I replied dryly, knowing better than to expect a genuine compliment from him. Without another word, he pocketed his phone and offered me his arm. I hesitated for a moment, then took it, letting him lead me out of the suite and down to the waiting car. The ride to the gala was as silent as ever, the tension between us palpable. When we arrived at the venue, a grand, historic building in the heart of the city, I could feel my nerves kicking into high gear. The entrance was lined with photographers, their cameras flashing as they captured the arrivals. Jason tightened his grip on my arm, and I took a deep breath, forcing myself to smile as we stepped out of the car. The moment we entered the building, I was hit by the opulence of it all. The grand chandelier, the marble floors, the beautifully dressed guests. It was like something out of a movie. But despite the glamour, I couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place, like I was an outsider looking in. Jason quickly slipped into his role, greeting people with ease, his charming smile never faltering. I, on the other hand, struggled to keep up, trying to remember names and faces and forcing myself to engage in small talk that felt painfully superficial. As the evening wore on, I found myself drifting away from Jason, needing a moment to breathe. I wandered over to a quiet corner, watching the crowd from a distance. It was then that I realized just how isolated I felt, surrounded by people, yet completely alone. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice someone approaching until they were standing right beside me. Not enjoying the party, I turned to find a tall, handsome man with dark hair and striking blue eyes smiling down at me. He was dressed in a tailored suit, and there was an air of confidence about him that immediately put me on edge. I'm fine, I replied, forcing a smile. He raised an eyebrow, clearly not convinced. You don't look like you're having fun. But then, these events can be a bit much, can't they? I nodded, not sure what to say. There was something about him that made me uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Forgive me, I haven't introduced myself, he said, extending a hand. I'm Leo Blackwood, and you are Eve Coleman, I replied, taking his hand. His grip was firm, his smile charming, but there was something in his eyes that made me wary. Coleman? As in Jason Coleman's wife, he asked, his smile widening. Yes, I said, feeling a pang of discomfort at the way he said it. Interesting, he murmured, his eyes flicking over me in a way that made my skin crawl. I forced myself to keep smiling, but my instincts were screaming at me to get away from this man. There was something off about him, something that set off alarm bells in my head. Well, Mrs. Coleman, it was a pleasure meeting you, he said, releasing my hand. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. With that, he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there with a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. I returned to Jason's side, but my mind was elsewhere. Who was Leo Blackwood, and why did he seem so interested in me? I couldn't help but feel that our brief encounter was just the beginning of something that I wasn't sure I was ready for.